We have Scott Braddock on line one. Scott, how's it going?
It's going well. It's Matt Squared this morning. Good morning, gentlemen.
Yeah. Hey, one of the things that I was going to bring up, Super Tuesday is coming right up here in Texas, and it's going to be, we're at the last day of early voting. It's literally right around the corner. You have South Carolina right before then. Do you think that's going to affect Super Tuesday at all?
Absolutely. South Carolina, all eyes on what they're going to do there on Saturday. All the calculations could change in this race, absolutely. Look, Joe Biden, the former vice president, has not done well so far in all these states, in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada, with very poor performances. And look, he has staked his entire candidacy on the question of what? Of electability, that he's the guy who can win. And the problem is when you don't win, and you don't win, and you don't win, that argument starts to fall apart, right? So he's got to really show up, not just, with an impressive victory. It's got to be a really, really strong victory in South Carolina to change the trajectory of his candidacy, which could change the shape of the whole race heading into Super Tuesday. I'm not sure that any of these other candidates who are in the so-called moderate lane of the Democratic Party are going to drop out after the results in South Carolina, just because of the timing of everything, although I'm sure some of them will come under some pressure to drop out. Look, there's a lot of Democrats who are very worried that the Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders is going to run away with the nomination here, or at least be in contention to get the nomination by the time the Democratic National Committee rolls around, or the convention rolls around. This is all about the hunt for delegates. They're trying to secure enough of the 1,900 or so delegates it takes to secure the nomination before they go to their convention. And on Super Tuesday, 1/3 of all the delegates that are up for grabs will be there for the taking by these candidates. So we could come out of Super Tuesday when Texas and California and about 14 states around the country, when we all vote on Tuesday, we could come out of that with either a clear front runner or it could still be just sort of a muddled mess on the Democratic side.
So I'm going to ask you about Michael Bloomberg. He put all of his stock in Super Tuesday. He's been in a couple of the debates, but he hasn't been in any of the elections. Nobody knows where he stands yet. He's got no delegates. Do you think that's going to hurt him in Super Tuesday in the long run?
Well, we'll see. He's making a big gamble here. He's saying that these early states don't matter, which, by the way, there are a lot of Democrats who agree with that. There's a lot of Republicans who agree with the idea that these first states shouldn't necessarily be the ones to be the kingmakers. Why is it that, the farmers in Iowa and the people who live in the liberal communities in New Hampshire, why is it they get to be the ones to decide who the chief executive officer of the United States ought to be? And obviously there's a lot more debate about that after the meltdown in Iowa this year. So with Bloomberg, he's pushing all his chips in on Texas and California and the Super Tuesday states and seeing whether or not he can, secure some of these delegates. I'll be interested to see the way that they award the delegates is interesting. Just the other day, a frustrated Democrat was saying, look, the Republicans, it's winner take all in their states as they go through the nominating process. And so the winner is the winner on the Republican side. With Democrats, they kind of give out participation trophies.
Yeah.
Because if you get 15% in Texas, if you get 15% statewide, then you'll be awarded delegates. And if you can win 15% or more in the state Senate districts around the state, then you also are awarded delegates that way. And Bloomberg has been able to put so much money into this. It's hard to put. It's hard to overstate just how his spending has impacted the way the other candidates are having to run. In December, Bloomberg was able to make an ad buy in Houston where he bought $1 million worth of television, and just by doing it on the day that he did it, he raised ad rates in the Houston market by 45%. Other candidates can't do that. He's running television in places like probably in Lubbock. I know he's doing it in Abilene. There's no other Democrat who's running television in Abilene, at least not yet, although I saw Pete Buttigieg was buying some television in places like Amarillo and Wichita Falls. But look, there are some Democrats in West Texas, as you know, and the way they award the delegates is if you're able to win state Senate districts in places like Houston or Dallas, you get more delegates because there are more Democrats there. Out in West Texas, he would get a few delegates for maybe winning among the Democrats who might participate there. And so, again, it could create a situation where someone like Biden or Sanders does really well, sort of at the very top of the pyramid there, and then Bloomberg comes in and gets awarded some delegates, and suddenly he's in the hunt for the presidency.
So now I don't know how true it is, but I read an article that essentially said that Biden and Warren and some of the other candidates are completely pretty much out of money, that Bloomberg and Bernie Sanders are about the only two that have the money to truly spend after Super Tuesday.
It could be. The money's drying up for some of these folks. Let's put a fine point on it. The reason that a person drops out of the race for the presidency is usually that they don't have money to continue. Running for president is expensive. Having to do these $1 million ad buys, television and traveling around, having staffers. It's like having a large small business when you're running for president. It's its own organization, and it's a real test of how you can run an organization. And so, if they don't have money, they're not going to continue on.
So the last poll I saw, I think, said Bernie Sanders looks like he's going to win Texas. Have you seen anything else lately that seems differently?
That last University of Houston poll earlier in the week has suggested that Biden and Sanders were virtually tied here. As for South Carolina, which may sort of shape what happens in Texas, there's a lot of Texas Democrats who, I mean, it's anecdotal. I've heard a lot of folks say that they're waiting to see what happens in South Carolina, but the numbers bear it out. I mean, earlier in the week, I think 8 days into early voting, Republicans were still outvoting Democrats statewide in Texas. Two things going on. One is you have a lot of Democrats who are waiting to see what was going to unfold in Nevada and South Carolina, and two, Republicans have real races. All across the state. I think there are 6 congressional primaries on the Republican side, where we had what they called, the national media was calling it the Texodus, with all these members of Congress who are retiring. And so those seats have to be filled. And down in the Houston area, you have a couple of these congressional races where there are more than a dozen candidates just on the Republican side vying for seats in Congress, and then that goes all the way up to out in Nell's area with Mike Conaway and Mac Thornberry retiring from Congress. And so there are real races there on the Republican side. There are real reasons for Republicans to come out and vote, and so we'll see what these Democrats do. And it could end up that on Super Tuesday next week, that we see kind of a version of what we saw in 2008. You gentlemen may remember that at that time you had Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were still running for the presidency, were still running for the Democratic nomination. John McCain had already sewn up the nomination on the Republican side, and we had election day voting that was just sort of over the top, with people after 7 o'clock in some areas were still waiting for hours in line to be able to vote. And in a presidential race like this, you can count on the fact that a lot of people are going to want to vote, but in this situation, a lot of folks have sort of made the strategic decision, if you will, to not participate in early voting. And I was talking to a Texas Democrat here in Dallas yesterday who was sort of frustrated over the fact this is somebody who was not a fan of Bernie. They said, these Bernie fans, they're all fired up, and they'll invest the 5 hours.
Uh-oh. Then we lose Scott Braddock. You still there? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll be right back after these messages.